Hey everyone, welcome to the Worship Artistry podcast. My name is Jason Houtsma, and with me
is Christina Kasanka.
You know, you probably don't know this, but that's literally how she talks most of the time.
That I do.
There's a lot of singing. There's a lot of different accents.
Yes.
There's a lot of different things. But
Jason has threatened to just pull out a camera and try to start filming me, and it never works.
It sounds weird when you say it like that. Like, sometimes I try and catch her singing because I think that would be funny. I don't just randomly start trying to film you.
Good clarification. Anyways.
But well, Christina, how are you feeling sick right now?
I am not. I do not.
Because I thought maybe after we posted that viral video, you might be feeling a little bit ill.
I mean, I feel kind of fantastic. Not that I did anything except post this video.
That's true.
The video in question is a funny idea that we had over 6 months ago.
Oh, it was like a year.
It's been a long time. We've been sitting on this footage for a really long time.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's like when you're starting out something and you're like, I've got an idea and I want to execute it this way. And especially when it's comedy, mm-hmm. Timing is so important and getting everything just right. Like telling the story in as few shots, like it was a real learning experience. And so we had this idea that we were like, we're going to kind of do an office style, like following a sound engineer through a Sunday morning. And it's fun. And, and we posted it. I was like, I think this is funny. I showed it to my wife. She didn't think it was funny at all. But she's like, I mean, I guess like worship people would get this, right? I'm like, no, trust me, this is fun. And it was one of those things where we posted it, we just put it up on Instagram, and then it did kind of nothing for a few days. And then all of a sudden it was like, Christina sends me a text and she's like, oh, we got like 300 likes on this, which for us, like we're a pretty small Instagram account. Yeah. We kind of came late to that party, but we threw it up on there and all of a sudden like the next day I checked and we had like thousands.
Yeah.
And so if you don't follow us on Instagram at Worship Artistry, you should, because we post funny viral videos that we made.
Do.
And it's not going to be the only one. We have quite a few kind of in the works.
Jason's brain is turning. Let's just say.
It's always turning.
I knew that it was funny when I initially, because we published it on YouTube as well, and I, before it went live, showed my sound guy at church. And I was like, oh, watch this video that we're going to release. And he watched it and he was actually chuckling and laughing. And I was like, okay, this is good. Like, if he's laughing at all the things that we're doing, I know that it's good.
Yes. And it is really interesting, though, because the comments that came underneath it, right?
Yeah.
So the idea behind it is really about kind of investing not just in sound, but in people and that sort of thing. And it was surprising the amount of people that were like, why would pastors ever invest in the worship team? Or why would, like, kind of these, like,
so really sad to see,
really
honestly,
sad.
yeah. Which
really.
Is like what we talk about often,
right.
Is that we're all about like you can have amazing gear, amazing sound, but if your musicians aren't being taught and invested in, like
confident and having the tools that they need to to enjoy it.
Yep.
Like, what's the point?
Yes.
That's how people burn out.
Yep, they do.
So anyway, we thought it was kind of a fun idea. And speaking of fun ideas, we have a guest today whose whole thing is ideas.
Yes, creativity.
Rich Kirkpatrick wrote the book Mind Blown, which is about a number of things about creativity, about stoking creativity. It's about kind of communicating creativity, which is something we're not always the best at. And Rich is somebody that I seem to run into. I don't go to a ton of conferences, but he always seems to be at the ones I'm at. So we run into each other a lot. He's a good guy. He's a thoughtful guy. And so I was like, yeah, man, let's give it a listen. So without further ado, Rich Kirkpatrick. So you've written this book, Mind Blown: Unlock Your Creative Genius by Bridging Science and Magic. And so I'm just curious, like, what we can go into the book and everything, but I'm just curious, like, is this mainly what you're doing? Like, what are you doing right now?
What am I doing?
To be a man of many talents.
A guy of many hats, at least 6 of them. So I'm leading worship at my local church now, finally. It's been a few years. But I've been coaching and consulting different church leaders in churches. So when I started teaching worship leaders, my 6 hats of the worship leader, I came up with this other thing about what's the creative process, because so many people asked me, what is this creative process? And so I did a workshop 8 years ago on it, and it was the most highest response I got from anything. So I said, okay, there's something to this. And so I kept being curious. One, because of my experience being difficult, just trying to explain, what do I do? See, this is difficult, right? When you're a creative person, what do you actually do? Well,
Yeah.
you're working when you're not even thinking you're working. Everybody is wired to be creative and to create. And of course, the Christian side of that is my faith tells me we're made in the image of a creator. So I understand what that is, image bearer of a creator, and everyone is. But the scientists are saying, well, as we studied the brain and we look at the networks in the brain and we look at how things work, when people create their best work, these people who are incredible geniuses, what is it that happens in the brain? Well, we're wired to create. There's no other animal on the planet that can do what people do.
Hmm.
So it's like we are created. And I could say it on this podcast, other podcasts, try to explain this is what I believe, but
Yeah.
I know you probably believe this too.
I have to do the same thing. I always have to go through the I teach church music. That's how I have to explain it. Songs that people do in church, and then people are like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we do music in church. It's a lot more cooler than people think it is. But anyway, especially when you do it. But so the idea is we're all wired to create, and so we're made in this image of a creator. And so why, if we were to learn how to be more creative, we're actually learning how to be more of our truer selves.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that don't make us our truest selves are the things that stop creativity. So when it comes to leadership, when it comes to all those things, and here's the other thing, 20% of us are divergent thinkers, as it's called. And what is it? 80%, of course, the rest of it are what they call convergent thinkers. So if you're this person who just pops with ideas all the time, your ideation is happening all the time, idea generation just comes easy, you're a minority, so it's hard to fit in. So I wanted to help the 80% of people understand that this is a process, that it's scientific, and that it works, and that if you were to learn how to do it better, you would find more success. And also, if you are a person who is, the artistic type or creative type, in that 20%, that you can also learn that 80% of creativity is also the other side too. Mm-hmm. That really, when you put humanity, these two kinds of preferences together, you really see two sides of a coin. And that's why that bridge in the book, the idea of bridging science and magic, those are metaphors. Science, a metaphor for logic and reason and those things. And magic is a metaphor for kind of things we can't describe all the time, but they just happen. They're in the shower and the idea comes. Or in the bathtub, as it was, eureka, I'm in the bathtub and I find an idea. So those things, there's a bridge between them, and 3 brain networks actually represent those things. And I found out, I said, really? So I also learned that creativity is nothing. I don't invent things from nothing. Mm-hmm. So I'm not bound by creating something, because I'm not God, out of nothing. I can take what's in front of me and make sense of it. And that's kind of the gift that God's given me. Or, to those of you who are worship leaders listening to this, it's like Adam named the animals. We kind of do the same thing when we take our music and our experiences together and we make sense of things.
Do you have any ideas on how to help us get from where we are at now? And when I say we, I mean kind of the church and our culture, as it is now. Because I think you're right. Like there is go into any worship group, go into any Facebook thing, whatever, and it's this music all sounds the same. I don't like this. These lyrics are all whatever. I don't believe this one thing. Like it's a whole lot of. It's kind of funny. It's like we're all supposed to be worship leaders and musicians, and all that's happening is just tearing down everything. And there's very little actually building back up. There's very I'm with you. I feel like for myself, I've been doing worship artistry for 11 years now, and I very much look at it as like a service. It's me going, hey, I don't even care how I feel about this music, I care about the we don't post. There's been a few songs that I'm like, we're not gonna do that one, just because of the lyric content or whatever. But for the most part, I've very much looked at it as like, okay, I'm here to serve. I'm here to help people learn these songs. So I've been in so many different denominations and all over the map in terms of everything from charismatic to like Christian Reformed. Like
I've kind of experienced it all, and I see beauty in all of it and go, oh, okay, this is for this and this is for this. And I'm happy to do that. However, there is also, it's been 10 years of throwing myself into that. And in that process, that this next year, like I've kind of looked at Worship Artistry and go, we're going to really lean into the artistry. We're going to actually lean into these things that inspire us and give us joy, because the church has a tendency to to focus on the use and leave out the creativity. Okay, you play guitar. Come over here and play guitar. Okay, great. No, don't just do this. And with good reason, because you have to learn how to play in a band. There's things, but when you talk about transcendence, to me, I think of like moments in worship when I am being the most myself, when I am playing in a way that is connected with everybody and also is connected to my heart. And we're all expressing ourselves to God and letting God speak to us in those moments. And that's kind of where that's kind of where that magic happens.
But I was in a worship leader group, one of the biggest ones online. And I remember asking a question. People were saying, you can't watch this particular TV show and still be a Christian. And I said, hey, wait a minute, guys, because I'm a little older, and there's mostly young people talking about their pedal boards, but arguing about that. Now they're arguing about, this. And I said, you know what? Let's hold back for a second. Let's argue about the things Jesus argued about. And what he said was, widow, orphan, poor, imprisoned person. What are we doing for those persons first? So I say, if we're going to call each other out, we have our conscience. Live by your conscience. That's not what I'm saying. Don't do that. But I'm saying there is something that's that is a basic level that is in black and white. And even Jesus' brother James, closest to Jesus and relatives, said, this is what you're supposed to do, what true religion is. They kicked me out of the group. I literally got kicked out of the group for saying, let's not argue about TV. If we're going to argue, let's argue about how we feed the poor as worship leaders. What songs are we writing that talk about the things that bother Jesus? And so it's simple. It's not a theological argument, but it is. And so, but the artist part of the worship world that you and I are in has been suppressed, because what the artist is really the prophet. It's like Nathan going and saying, hey, King David, can I tell you a story about this little lamb? We're not thinking about the offering plate sometimes, because we apologize for that. We're not thinking about angering people. We're not trying to do any of those things. We're trying to create something. And we're trying to be that part of ourselves that's the child that we're made to be, that makes things, not just complains about things, not just compares things. And so the idea of worship artistry is a wonderful, beautiful concept, because really it's easy to complain. It's easy to tear down. It's much harder to create.
So let me ask you this, right? So there's kind of different schools of thought around what to do when we run into those impasses. How do you know when to push through disagreement and kind of like work within it, versus when it's just time to, hey, you know what? Bless you, bless me. We're gonna go do different things.
I think the ethic in there is this: it's a family. If you view your faith community as a family, as a community, what's best for one is best for all. We are afraid to say what's healthy, what's best for me in an ethical sense, for my mental well-being, my spiritual well-being, is best for the church. Not maybe what's best for that particular pastor or brand or their offering for that week, maybe, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. What's wrong is when we equate this group, that the group itself somehow suffers when one person is needed to have special attention or to leave or to do something different. It's not a zero sum, in other words. It shouldn't be a zero sum, but we think of it that way. So I think we should have more freedom to look at it that way. And of course, when I was in ministry, it's always what's best for the church. And so I came second. But really what I found out was a lot of that was just the preference of the leadership at the time. And they have a right to have a preference. If you're an employee, they have a right to tell you what to do, and that's perfectly fine. But it's also right for you to say, this job, if I'm an employee, is not right for me. Or if I'm a volunteer, they may want this, and that's great. That's their right. But I don't have to do this if it's something that doesn't help me and my family, if they're asking me to do things that my marriage is being affected by or my parenting, but I am a person, an image bearer of God. And if I'm not able to be that, how can I lead others to be that? And so I really think there is this upside down thing. It's not about power. If we take the power dynamic out of it and say it's about family, then sometimes a 3-year-old in your family's got a lot of power because they have some immediate needs. And you know what? You don't complain.
So what is your personal creative process? Like give me a glimpse of what that looks like for Rich Kirkpatrick.
Well, it's probably like a lot of people's. So if I take it into like songwriting, you start with one thing. Let's say I start with an idea, like there's a song around that we imagined. So we started ideation. So from there, where can we take this? So we came up with all these different metaphors and let it sit for a while and came back, honed it down, and started developing the best of those ideas. And so that then you might test it with some friends or have a process where it seems like it's in a straight line, so that 1, 2, 3, but you kind of go back and forth between 1, 2, and 3, and 2 and 1, and back to 3. There's nothing new under the sun. So my job isn't to create something from nothing. It's to look at what's around me and in me and create something from that. And that's freeing for one, because I don't have to come up with something that's never been done before, but I get to come up with it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're talking about bringing other people into the process and recognize that, there's kind of that romanticism around, the solitary artist who lives out in a cabin and just makes this masterpiece and comes forward with it. And it's not usually how it works, right? Like there's usually things that we're bringing to the table and something different, and having other people kind of help craft and shape those things. And in a lot of ways you're talking about craft, right? Because it's like, a lot of times we get married to these ideas like, oh, I was inspired to do this and I did it, and here it is. And it's like, well, no, the craft is working on it. It's tweaking it. It's actually making it something that other people can use. And I love the intention around that.
Creativity is so powerful, whether it's teaching kids music, art, literature, kinesthetics, sports and things to help them discover who they are. You're making something. You're not just trying to mimic. You're trying to learn from what another person does. We need to really encourage people to create no matter where they are. And, they're going to mess up. Kids start with scribbles. But if we look at what they're scribbling and appreciate that, you never know. We might be looking at Picasso or something and not even know it. Because most kids think they can draw or sing or dance, and then almost all of them do, until we start saying, well, no, you can't. And so then they stop singing, they stop drawing, they stop imagining things, because then imagination is only that. So 20% of people prefer to be divergent, but I would say because of our society, we've really taken a huge percentage of our population and we've handicapped them. So there's all the studies about education, about what music does for math skills, what it does for language. Because, if you're creative, you're going to think in pictures. But if you could think in pictures and in sound and in language, your parts of your brain are being stretched and grown, and our brain does grow even when you're as old as me. It's going to help people become better at who they're supposed to be. And what's happened is we have mimicry going on, where people take the wonderful tools we have, like Chat GTP, and they write blog posts supposedly, and as opposed to thinking like they're capable of doing that. And mimicry is boring us. What we need is not necessarily to take away all the tools, but to learn to use those tools like paintbrushes and practice it. So yeah,
it unlocks it, right?
Yeah.
Like I always say, like tools are supposed to unlock things for us. It's supposed to be like I don't need a guitar. I don't need the craziest pedal board in the world. I can make an amp and a guitar sound good. But man, if that one thing inspires me to play something different and unlock something for me, well, then it allows me to be more creative. Now, if I start using it as a crutch and then I just settle into that and I never do anything else, well, then,
That's why you don't play, like a lot of guys my age still play phase pedals. which I don't think it's really come back. I'm kind of hoping.
I bought one in high school and it just sits in my drawer.
Yeah, it's something that doesn't come back. But yeah, the idea is having more paintbrushes, more color, experimentation, finding out that. And so if you're always curious, you're going to use your tools in a different way than somebody who simply looks to mimic. And so really, it's not about what the tools are, about even your skill level. It's really about your engagement and your curiosity to see something and to help make that happen, that whatever that is. And that's something for a lot of your listeners is a worship service where people are going to come and you want them to have a certain experience. You're imagining in your mind. Prayer takes imagination, by the way. This is another reason that I think creative process is important. You can't really pray without imagination. You can't really be formed spiritually without somehow going to that part of your brain that imagines scenarios that aren't there. You don't need to see what's it called, The Chosen, in order to imagine who Jesus is. Mm-hmm. It might help you, but you still should use your imagination and still should do that. So whatever it is that you're using as your inspiration, don't stop growing your imagination.
That was beautiful. Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining the podcast, man. I can talk about creativity forever, and I love the way you approach it. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, he is indeed a mellow dude.
Yes, that he is.
He just classifies, even, his appearance. If you watched it, you'll see, his like sweet stash.
Yeah, you expect him to have a pipe.
Yeah.
He's reading
just
some.
Chilling, and he's just, talking so peacefully about creativity and is just going so in depth. As I was, editing the interview, I was like, wow, this is a lot of information.
Yeah, I know. Well, and it's funny because I don't know. I always think of creative people as kind of, and maybe it's the creative people I hang out with, but just kind of spastic, chaotic, a lot of ideas all the time, all the things.
I'm pointing at Jason.
That's how I think of it, And so when you find somebody who's just like very thoughtful and he's like, oh yeah, there's all kinds of versions of this.
Yep.
So
be sure to read his book.
Yep,
he talked plenty about it, but be sure to grab it and read it
or listen to it.
Or listen to it.
You can listen to the dulcet tones of Rich Kirkpatrick reading you his book.
Yes.
Just blowing your mind.
And after you read it or before, be sure to go to worshipartistry.com and check us out. We have over 600 song lessons available for you, your team, anyone that is wanting to learn and improve on their skills in playing an instrument and being a musician, because that's being a worshipful musician is what it's all about. So be sure to go and do that, and we'll see you next time.
And follow us at Worship Artistry on Instagram.
Yes, please.